What is going on, y'all? KMBest here. Let's take a look at Marvel Snap's new card, Jocasta. Jocasta is a 3/3 with an activate ability that automatically activates the other activates at her location. If you think that she reminds you of someone, you're probably right. She is very reminiscent of Invisible Woman First Steps, and her scaling has similar things that you have to know, because a lot of what this card is doing is getting copied with Prodigy and other methods of copying. So the way it works is, because there is code in Marvel Snap that prevents things from going to infinite, effectively what happens is one Jocasta gets you an additional proc of the activate. Two Jocastas get you 4 additional procs of the activate, because they try to activate each other, it works for a little bit, and then they run into the thing that prevents Odin from going infinite. 3 Jocastas gets 15 procs. So again, those are additional. It's effectively 1 additional with 1 Jocasta, 4 additional with 2 Jocastas, and 15 additional with 3 Jocastas. This is not an incredibly common thing that's going to come up, but you're going to need to remember those numbers, because the other thing that Jocasta does is, if she's on the board, she effectively makes your activates into on reveals, which is why I'm phrasing it like that. If you are able to activate the card alongside Jocasta, it's much easier to remember. It's 2, then 5, then 16. But if you're not, it ends up being 1 additional, then 4, then 15. That's the basics of what you need to know to play this card the way a high-level player would. Remember those numbers, because they are important to her functionality. This was my most successful Jocasta list. It's a very all-in Invisible Woman deck, and I think you guys will probably remember how this deck tends to play out. The goal here is to use Jocasta to multiply your Invisible Woman even further. A couple of basic play tips: if you are able to Prodigy a Jocasta, you prefer doing that to Prodigying Invisible Woman. It will give you more procs. That's really the only special thing you need to know. We also, of course, have Fantasticar back in the list, because it is also awesome to spread a bunch of power around, effectively giving you like a Wong spectrum angle when you don't pull off your massive, gigantic, multi-Invisible Woman combo angle. This is a deck that has a lot of power in it, and it can do a lot of really strong stuff, but I do think there are some notable weaknesses. So despite my success with it, I think this is a deck that's going to find it hard to stay at the top of a metagame. One card that was really good against me was Danger. Danger is phenomenally powerful against basically anyone doing Jocasta stuff. I don't think I beat that card 1 time if it came down on turn 4. It just didn't happen. And so you have a deck that is very reliant on onboard setup, and that means that cards like Danger, cards like Killmonger, cards that are able to interact with your onboard setup are going to be very powerful against you. That's not even getting into the super adaptoid of it all. And I want to be clear, I did really well with this list. I think it's awesome. But there are going to be limits to how good a deck like this can ever be when the counterplay to it is so clear. It's not even just those cards. I was getting like Lady Deathstruck, right? That is going to be something you're going to have to deal with as long as this deck has a target on its back. In a normal metagame, you might be able to whip this out, but I strongly suspect that there is some sort of Killmonger Danger monstrosity type deck that isn't necessarily discovered right now that this deck can almost literally never beat. It is quite powerful, but what I'm emphasizing here is that it is contextual. It is relying on onboard stuff, which makes your snaps a little bit awkward. Right now, I don't think people are estimating the power properly because they haven't had enough experience with Jocasta. But I think over time, as people start to do that, it'll happen a little bit more. If anything, this deck reminds me of a more consistent discard. That's what it feels like. This is a very similar deck to a Dakin discard deck, wherein the disruption can happen on board from a variety of different sources. Your opponents probably know what you're going to do, and your numbers get very stupid if they don't stop you. Similar concept here, Honifer almost effectively reviving the old Twin Blade archetype. I enjoy the idea of this one because one thing that gates a lot of Jocasta stuff is energy. So being able to Moon Girl into discounts is honestly quite slick if you get the Moon Girl Quinjet, and it does let you deploy just a pretty asinine amount of points pretty consistently. Again, though, the analogy is to discard, right? Like if you're doing this kind of stuff, there are going to be things that you run into that are just painfully awkward for you to deal with. You're counting on your discounts, which means you're vulnerable to Mobius. Your stuff gets blown up. You're vulnerable to interaction in that way. All the cards I talked about, Danger, Killmonger, Lady Deathstrike, seeing one of those will probably ruin you. And while, yes, you are less vulnerable to Killmonger than the aforementioned deck, which is admittedly a Marvel Boy deck, this is still going to be a deck that's counting on Sunspot a decent amount of the time, and it's really not happy to have that guy blown up. And so this is a very all-in powerful deck that is slightly less weak to Killmonger with a little bit more confusion in where its points are able to go. I've wondered about trying to get V-Hand in here. There is likely a spot for it because this deck is investing a little more heavily in not just being an Invisible Woman deck, in also trying to be an Omega Sentinel awesome Andy deck. And I think that's cool and cute, and especially Omega Sentinel is like a legitimate thing to want to get multiple Jocastas on. Like, you get 5 procs of Omega Sentinel, that is legitimately awesome, but it is not necessarily something, again, that I would count on to stay at a top space in the metagame. I don't know if you noticed this, but Jocasta has 3 power, which means we can play her in Cerebro 3. This is a very normal Cerebro 3 deck with a couple of activates to slap on to your Jocasta. Sometimes you're going to be able to use Bastion to get multiple Jocastas. Again, if you're able to do Jocasta into Bastion, play the Omega Sentinel down, and then, you know, use your Jenny Kale on turn 5. So you are on turn 4 going into turn 5, so you can play Omega Sentinel 2-cost Jocasta. That is just a ton of points. That is like minus 35 to their board. You can win games without Cerebro. I don't know that you need to. Like, I don't know if it's a good idea to be like, I want to build to win games without Cerebro. Like, you're Cerebro. Just win the games where you draw Cerebro. You're going to do that anyway, right? And I really wonder about, like, how good is this actually going to be? Is this the kind of thing where it's like a flash in the pan that we're experimenting with? Is this going to be a really, like, strong backbone to the Cerebro 3 archetype, giving it that added additional power? I can see it going both ways, but I'm not sure what Cerebro is missing is points right now, especially with the addition of Bastion. I'm interested to see how it ends up coming out, but I'm not the most confident in what it's doing. I like that it's able to do these things, though. I like that it's able to sort of hybridize itself in a way so it doesn't have to be as reliant on Cerebro, because that is a lot of what made Cerebro 3 good in the first place, is that it was able to do that and then just like put you in a position where if they have Cerebro, you just instantly lose, so you just have to retreat. It's a very good bluff snap deck, I think, and this will just give it a little more beef that allows that to happen. This might be the most butt deck to ever butt deck. I can't tell exactly if it's a butt deck or a splat deck. Butt mentioned he was playing a splat deck. I believe it was probably this, but who knows? He is also liable to come up with something like this. It is just a pure clown show list. This list is the optimal 50-50 list, which is to say every single game your opponent is going to have to be like, am I getting 50-50'd on here? And they probably are. I lost 8 cubes to Butt because my Bruce Banner decided to betray me on the Galactus lane. That's life sometimes, I think. But this is a deck that just has enough mix-ups in it that if you are a good player, you can do cool stuff with it. But I want to be 100% clear. I consider this a meme deck that a good player is succeeding with, much more than the kind of deck that should justify a Jocasta purchase. This list is in here for the people who have already purchased Jocasta and are looking for something really stupid to do with her. Warlock Jocasta, Galactus is super cheap, Hobgoblin is super cheap, is a very funny endgame. It should come as no surprise that there are a bunch of Invisible Woman decks to go with Jocasta because of the way in which you want to multiply your Invisible Woman. That is a fairly straightforward thing that I would expect to happen. What is surprising, or not necessarily to me, but might be surprising to most people, is how few Thing First Steps decks there have been in the context of being an Invisible Woman deck. And I think that's because I think a lot of people forgot that when you're doing Prodigy stuff, when you're doing a bunch of copies, you don't necessarily want to have a Thing First Steps in the deck because he takes up a lot of space. But he is quite good if you can get him down, depending on how you manage priority, in contested lanes against other decks like this. Now, I have had the thought in the back of my mind that this deck would be better if it cut Thing First Steps and just played Danger. Because I think that's actually kind of beast mode to try to do. Plus, it actually gives you another reason to play Zabu. This is a deck that I think probably has a little bit of room to grow because it's been a while since anyone's really tried to do Zabu stuff in this shell. But I think there is some really interesting potential here. I don't know who put this list together, but when I look at it, I'm like, I could put a Danger in here and things could get really messy for my opponents really fast. Are you a fan of your opponents retreating and then you never actually getting good cube equity? Then you can play this list, which I believe is, I want to say it's a Fox list. I think he was on at least something similar. That is, of course, winner of Golden Gauntlet Qualifier 1, I believe. And the deck is okay, Black Widow Jocasta is strong, but also it's the kind of strong that makes your snaps bad because you snap your Black Widow Jocasta and you're getting like max 2 out of it because if they're dead because they can't draw cards, they just leave, right? And if they are able to get through it, your snap turns bad. It's got a bit of a clog cube equity kind of thing going on without the guarantees of winning lanes that Clog has. It has to count a lot more on what it doesn't know, which is your opponent's hand, than what you do know in the case of Clog, which is your opponent's board. And I think Clog makes the sacrifice in cube equity because it is able to make that up in knowledge, right? It knows what's actually going on to a much greater degree than someone relying on Black Widow does. And I think that that is the ultimate failing that will eventually undo this list. Bastion is, I think, pretty likely to get displaced from one of the 2 decks where he actually makes sense here. And that is because of the way Jocasta works to enable your bullseye to actually happen if you top deck him on 6. I'm not saying that's the world's best thing you can ever do. I'm not saying it's good enough with Dakin. I don't necessarily know if this is a permanent state of affairs. I think they're fairly comparable cards. What I will tell you is being able to activate a bullseye on 6 is awesome. And this makes it more likely that you're able to do that. It also allows you to double up on bullseyes, but like being realistic, no one's staying for that. That's just not a thing anyone's going to stay about. I think this deck has a lot of similarities to the Invisible Woman decks in that it is this onboard combo-y type deck that randomly gets clowned by like Enchantress or Super Adaptoid or Danger or sometimes a Killmonger on your Meek or things like blowing up your lane that has a Bullseye and a Jocasta in it with a Lady Deathstrike. That's a very similar kind of thing. So I think ultimately what it'll come down to between these decks is which one fits the metagame a little bit better. The more Killmonger there is, the better off this deck is versus the 1-drop heavy deck with Marvel Boy in it. Yeah, I'm not sure if it'll end up outstripping other versions of the Invisible Woman deck because the point output is quite large, but I do think there is likely something to be said for this. I think this deck should also be grateful that Jocasta came out and people are really messing around with her right now because I don't think you want to double invest into Bullseye when your opponents are liable to play Mobius, and there's just a lot less of him because all the Mobius gamers are testing Jocasta. Last up, we have Activate Typal over here, just every Activate card. I want to say this one came from Owie. I'm not positive, but shout out to Owie anyway, very good player. This is a list that, in my opinion, is coasting very heavily on Danger. Like, I've talked a lot about Danger in this video. I think Danger is pretty massively underrated, and I think she's one of the best cards into any Jocasta deck. It is really hard to beat that because of the way Jocasta works. So if you want to be a counter deck, a Danger deck is a good place to start. For me, though, I think that if I want to be a danger deck, I don't want to be vulnerable to my opponent's dangers, right? I don't want to be the danger deck that loses to other danger decks. I want to be like some sort of hood misery killmonger danger deck and just be like, I am farming all of this stuff. And I think that's largely what the future holds for Jocasta. It's not that she's bad or anything. It's that what she's asking you to invest into is fragile. She is asking you to invest in fragility in a world where there are a lot of meaningful disruption pieces for it. And so she's felt amazing for me on day one, but I really want to emphasize that I am worried about the long-term tail on this one. So what is the verdict on Jocasta? I do think she's powerful. I think she does powerful stuff. I think the comparison to like a discard style deck is probably apt. And I think that is largely where she's going to end up landing long term. Right now, I'll say this. I had a 63% win rate with her in about 40 games. Like, she did powerful things. I felt good playing her. But I do think that ultimately the fragility of her shells are going to make her more of a deck that you pick when people aren't prepared for it than a deck you pick when people are. The counterplay to her is quite strong. Super Adaptoid is very, very reasonable. Danger is very, very reasonable. If you're an Invisible Woman deck, you really do not like seeing people playing Killmonger. You hate seeing people playing Lady Deathstrike. Honest to God, ramping out Lady Deathstrike is so strong against all of this stuff that, like, it is like a legitimate argument to play Arishem. So I think that on the whole, Jocasta is probably the most interesting card of the season. I think she is strong, but her fragility to me outshines her strength. Maybe Wong is a comparison that makes sense. It's kind of like that, where it's like, this is good and will win you games, but also, I think she's a little bit better than that, but a lot of why I think she's better than that is that she hooks in really powerfully to the Invisible Woman core that is already powerful. I think if she didn't have access to Invisible Woman, I don't think this card would be good. As is, I think it is good mostly in the context of Invisible Woman. And it is good there. Invisible Woman and Fantasticar are doing a lot of work for this card. And I do think she makes those decks better, but she also makes them more fragile. So the time to play them is not when she has the target on their back, but when she doesn't. That is largely my verdict. I think she is good, but a lot of it is wrapped up in IWFS, and I also think that if you're not playing IWFS, you end up vulnerable to the same things with a lower power output, which largely means I think she's good enough to buy, but not good enough to play all of the time. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Later. Oh, wait. Oh, no. We're going to put gameplay on this. I swear to God, there's going to be gameplay. Stick around. Don't leave. No, no, no. Going to prison. Take it back. He's going to Crown City. He's going to Crown City. Sorry, I misspoke here. Ugh. That ain't bad. I can't imagine my cards are any good for him, frankly. Yeah, like, I got the Killmonger, which is honestly kind of nice with it. And they don't have my Super Adaptoid, but they could have my Prodigy. But the more they got one drops, the more I am very happy about it, about how this went down. That's all one drop. So they're like a Morgan Le Fay deck, right? I don't want the Bruce procs. I want Bruce to not proc. You feel me? So I think it is... that probably.
I want the throne. Great power comes.
It's a Bruce transform angle, isn't it? Bruce transformed, we're good. Brucey, 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 Brucey. You won anyway. Minus 12? No, I would have lost by 1. Piece of shit. Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck.
Opponent snapped.
Wish I could snap again.
I am Iron Man.
Thinking about like Legion shit, maybe. Seems like it'd be hard to pull off. I mean, I don't really know how I lose. This is 8, right? So it's like the world's largest amount of points. I don't know how I lose. I can't wait to find out. Didn't think I was gonna, though.
Victory.
It was a card mid, yeah. Ooh, I hate that. Activating it is more power in case it moves. I'm aware that there are technically things to do, but I don't think you ever do them. What is this? Why not just instantly win here? Might be a Panther 50-50 technically. Might be.
Wakanda forever.
Wait, they just saw what I was snapping on and they were like, no, you fucking lose? Because they just Zola this. They get to, what is this? They have, this is 20 plus, they're effectively at 33. Can I go like this? SSM loses the buff. Okay, they're effectively at 30... 33. 30... They're effectively at 30. When I activate that makes Marvel Boy worse. Yeah. This is... I don't know. Okay, we're good.
Victory.
I like drawing cards. I like playing 1/5s. I see they're a man of culture as well. Can I trust this piece of shit or not? I don't know. I want to say I win. I'm not positive, though. I want to say I win like a motherfucker because I have a million of these. And then we have the same amount of gain threes. Oh, wait, no, I actually have one more gain three than they do. I actually have one more gain three than they do, so we take this one pretty handily.
Victory.
Add awesome Andy for Bruce. No thanks. It's like Bruce and Super Adaptoid in the flex here. They're still both dog shit. Oh my god. It's Kang Agamotto. Agamotto. Not snapping? I would probably snap. I'm gonna stay anyway because I think it's funny. GG's on that one, KM. All right, man. Don't do what you just... Just show up in the chat to say GG's. All right, man. Very cool. 1-1 now. I'm timing you out. What the fuck is your problem? Good God, man. I'm not actually timing him out. Okay, so how's this work? It's 4 of these and 4 of these, right? What if we prod middle? We lose Thena procs. I don't know.
We are the future.
Fascinating. Banger! A Bruce win! A Bruce win!